Film and television stardom has long been achieved as much through looks as talent. A handsome specimen, male or female, is often more likely to make it. Human beings are hugely influenced by outward appearances, at least initially, and so it has always been. God knows that, even if he perceives things differently. So when the leaders of Israel demand a king, he instructs his servant Samuel to mark out Saul, a tall, striking individual, as the chosen one. Starting out well, Saul would soon prove more of a liability than just a disappointment. A replacement was required. This time, the choice would prove a more subtle one. God had his eye on a family in the small town of Bethlehem, with plenty of suitable candidates. So Samuel harumphed his way there to pour the symbolic oil on the appropriate head, probably still feeling that kings tempted people to idol worship. Jesse had at least 8 sons and 2 daughters. He was a faithful and respected person, yet there were hidden tensions in his household, as well as hidden potential.
Oh, of course it were a surprise when the man of God, Samuel, pulled up. The menfolk, they railed against Saul now. What a disaster. He might have been some visible asset, tall and heroic looking, but he'd become more and more erratic. Who knew a replacement were in the offing? Certainly not me. Women play no part in politics, and I were out of favour, so even less in the loop. Yes, I delivered him a whole troop of sons. But that were my job, remember? Too bad that Jesse had now taken against David, our little un. Turned his brothers against him too. He were my baby, my rising star. Such a decent, hard-working, sensitive lad. Lower than a hired hand to his father. Dispatched off to the hills, minding the sheep. At least it distanced him from all those cold shoulders. Where was I? Oh yes, Samuel. He'd been a legend in Israel for decades, but I'd never seen him before. Somehow then I knew him instantly, and that his arrival were significant. Seemed fairly gruff, man, a few words. I were on hospitality duties, of course, so I could only loiter on the edge of the drama. It were a proper farce. I scurried back and forth from the kitchen, trying not to miss the goings-on. Took me a little while to work out what they were up to. But Samuel, well, he carried a massive ornamental flask, well, like a horn. And Jesse, he were bringing our lads in one by one. It were like a beauty pageant. Hello, my name is Eliab. I like hunting and sword fighting. I'm as strong as an ox. Ha ha! Da! And the man of God, well, he looks him up and down. He makes him do a twirl. And then, as the great dolt stands there, Samuel closes his eyes, raises his hands, praying like. His eyes snap open and he says, "No, the Lord has not chosen this one. Next!" That'll teach the arch bully, won't it? I shimmy through with a tray of drinks and nibbles. Abinadab next. Smooth as olive oil, perfectly groomed right down to his fingernails. Please God, let it not be him. Samuel looks hopeful like for a minute, but then closing the eyes, after the twirl and self-promotion, shakes his head. Shammah's turn now. At least he is not so vain, more of a thinker, not quite as tall, but marginally less vile to my David. Samuel looks enthusiastic. He asks him a question or two, but it's still a no. Nathaniel then, the halfway mark. He's a lazy lump. Drops his own chores on Davy at every opportunity. Samuel looks like he might just drop off. But when he opens his eyes, he simply seems impatient, like he's arguing with someone invisible. Radai, Ozem, Elihu, they all struck their stuff in turn. I'd worried that Jessie had noticed my frequent visits to top up their untouched wine, but he's too absorbed and looking anxious. When the last of those 7 has been rejected, the prophet is getting twitchy. Are these all your lads? Ha! Let's bring on the girls then. A queen, that'd be novel. Ha! Ah, to my surprise, Jessie then says, well, there's David, he's out with the sheep. Since Jessie become convinced he wasn't his son, I didn't think he'd even mention him. But then I'd reckon Eliab or Abinadab with their chiselled features and their rippling muscles were dead certs. Oh, of course I love the older ones, but Samuel demands that my boy must be brought. Also, Jessie's some deliberate time waster. And Davy arrives, brown as a bootstrap, agile as a goat, curly-headed like a prize ram, his lyre hanging from his shoulder, his staff in his hand, tiny lamb slung under his cloak, and grubby. Oh, my precious ignored babe, half the size of the others, and no pretensions. That's what comes of being the outsider. His father barely gives him a glance, but suddenly, without so much as a hello, my name is David, the man of God's up on his feet. Is that a smile? There's certainly relief as he takes the stopper out of his oil flask, and in front of all those others, he marks out Israel's next king. God's choice, mark you. Jessie daren't protest. He looks as baffled as the older boys do disgruntled. Seems God may look beyond the cosmetic. Maybe Saul was to teach our people that. And finally, all those insults and all humiliation are unimportant. God sees the unjustly treated. If nobody even remembers my name, I don't care now. They'll never forget my Davids.
In the wonderful film The Imitation Game, despised genius Alan Turing says, "It's the people nobody thinks anything of who end up doing the things that no one could have imagined." Again and again, that's how God seems to operate, deposing the mighty and raising up the humble and overlooked. To him, a good, albeit imperfect heart matters far more than appearances, the world's routine preference. Although David won't be faultless, his people's slightly rose-tinted hindsight will make him the best king ever. Except, of course, that another shepherd king, who genuinely cares about his people's welfare, will be one of his descendants, born in David's own hometown. Never a king in the worldly sense, I don't suppose he was anything much to look at. His only throne was a barbaric Roman cross, his only crown composed of thorns. Yet his was the very heart of God, and his life willingly surrendered to save even the indifferent and unworthy.